Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a story that honestly reads like something out of legend. It's a transformation so profound it's almost hard to wrap your head around.
Right.
Imagine this wealthy young guy, a real party leader, a master of revels in 13th century Italy. And his life just takes this abrupt, radical turn after a war, a stint in a prison cell, and then hearing a voice from a crucifix.
Yeah, it sounds like fiction, but it's absolutely the real start of a huge movement, one that really reshaped the Christian world and, well, left a massive mark everywhere.
It's not a fairy tale, is it?
Yeah.
This is the actual beginning of a movement that would change things dramatically. We're talking about the Order of Friars Minor, probably better known to most of you as the Franciscans.
That's the one. And we've gathered quite a stack of sources for this deep dive: historical accounts, encyclopedias, you name it, covering, what, over 800 years of their story?
A long history.
It really is. And our mission today, I think, is to unpack not just what the Franciscans are, but maybe why Saint Francis of Assisi's original vision, which seemed, frankly, impossible, sparked such a lasting legacy.
And also, crucially, how the order dealt with that fundamental challenge, right?
Sure.
How do you keep those core ideals, those really radical ideas, when you're suddenly growing like wildfire and things inevitably change?
Exactly. That's the tension.
It's a classic problem for any growing organization, isn't it?
Yeah.
Scaling up without, watering down the original spirit. So let's get into it. Let's start with the man himself, Saint Francis of Assisi. What do our sources tell us about his early life, before all this happened?
Well, Francis, born 1182 in Assisi, Italy. He was the son of Pietro Bernardone, who was a very wealthy merchant, and his mother was Lady Pica.
Okay.
And the sources really paint this picture of a very lively young man. He had a winning and merry personality, apparently led his gay contemporaries, meaning cheerful back then, in frivolity and folly.
So the life of the party.
Pretty much. His father was apparently proud of his son liking French things, even called him a child of France. He was really set up for a life of privilege, trained for the family textile business, hung out with the wealthy, dressed well, even knew how to fight for his city.
Definitely not the image we have of him now, is it? The simple robe and bare feet sort of thing. So what happened? What was the trigger for such a complete 180 in his life? Was there one specific moment?
Well, the sources point to this really critical period around age 19, that's 1201. Assisi was at war with Perugia, and Francis, apparently going off quite cheerfully, got captured. He was in prison for a whole year, and that experience, followed by a really serious illness when he got back, seems to have been the big aha moment.
Right. Prison and illness. That'll do it.
Yeah, it was during that time, that vulnerability, that he apparently started to understand that God wanted him to live a life of humility and service. He'd always loved nature's beauty, but after the illness, our sources say it just didn't bring him joy anymore. Instead, he looked inward, and what he saw there, his past life, apparently filled him with revulsion.
Wow. So the world just snapped into a different focus for him. And he didn't like what he saw in his own past.
Precisely. And he started seeing the world differently, too. He was confronted by the suffering of the poor, the inequalities in society, and especially the lepers, people who were completely neglected, abhorred, really.
Who he'd previously found repulsive, right?
Exactly. But the big transformation was that he started to see them not as outcasts, but as children of God and his brothers. And this internal shift, well, it completely changed what he did outwardly.
And this brings us to maybe the most famous moment in his story, that divine command at the Church of San Damiano. He's praying in this rundown church, and the crucifix actually speaks to him.
Yeah, that's the story. The words were apparently very clear. Francis, go and repair my house, for as you can see, it is falling into ruin.
Okay, repair my house.
And what's fascinating, our sources really emphasize this, is Francis's almost childlike literal interpretation at first. He didn't immediately jump to, the church as a whole institution needing repair.
He thought it meant the actual building.
Yes, he saw this crumbling church and heard a command to fix it. So he immediately starts rebuilding it, physically, with his own hands. He even sold some of his father's expensive cloth to get money for materials.
That's incredible. And it wasn't just San Damiano, was it? This act, even if he meant it literally, kind of tapped into something bigger that was happening in Italy at the time.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just San Damiano that was falling apart. Our sources say that in medieval Italy, many of the churches lay in ruins, their forlorn priesthood half-starved and ignored. So Francis's physical act, even if it started small, really symbolized this much broader need for spiritual renewal, for institutional repair.
And his own personal commitment just got more and more radical. He fully embraced what he called the gospel life, right? Gave up everything, dressed simply, which led to this incredibly dramatic public scene. His disinheritance. He's what, 22?
Yeah, about 22. His father was furious, obviously, about Francis selling his goods and just generally giving everything away. So he drags him before the bishop.
And Francis.
Francis apparently just joyfully accepts it, casts aside the money his father wanted back, and then takes off all his clothes, stands there naked and possessed of nothing in this world.
Whoa. In front of the bishop and everyone.
In front of everyone. It was this huge public rejection of his old life, his family wealth. The sources note the bishop covered him with his own cloak. It wasn't just about money. It was like his public espousals with that Lady Poverty whose praises he sang. He cut himself off completely.
Liberated himself in a way.
Yes.
So right after that dramatic moment, how did he actually live out this commitment to Lady Poverty? What did he do?
Immediately. He started working for his daily bread. He lived among and actually nursed the lepers, the very people he used to find disgusting, now seeing them as brothers.
That's a profound change.
It really is. And he kept rebuilding churches, not just San Damiano, but others too, especially this little chapel called Santa Maria degli Angeli, or the Portiuncula. And that place, that humble chapel, would become, as the sources say, the cradle of Franciscanism. That's where things really started to take shape.
So he's working, helping the sick, fixing churches, living in total poverty. But it still sounds like a very personal, almost solitary path at this stage. How does it go from Francis the hermit, more or less, to Francis the leader of this growing movement?
Well, the key moment seems to have been at Portiuncula in 1209. He heard a specific gospel reading during Mass. It was Matthew 10.9.
Okay, what did it say?
It basically said, "Go and preach. Do not possess gold, nor silver, nor money in your purses, nor scrip for your journey, nor 2 coats, nor shoes, nor a staff. For the workman is worthy of his meat." And for Francis, this wasn't just advice, this was it. This was the divine instruction for his real mission, an apostolate of preaching, total poverty, total reliance on God.
So that's the shift from rebuilding buildings to rebuilding lives through preaching. What was it about his preaching that just clicked with people? What drew them in?
He just started preaching right there in the open square in Assisi. And his message was apparently incredibly simple, full of love, very direct, just echoing Christ's teachings. But it wasn't only the words. People had seen him live it. They'd seen his total abandonment to God, his cheerfulness despite having nothing, his real compassion.
They saw it was authentic.
Exactly. They were drawn irresistibly to his mission. And the first rule for joining him was crystal clear. You had to possess nothing.
There's this great example of Bernardo of Quintavalle, a rich local guy who literally sold everything he owned and gave the money to the poor, just so he could follow Francis.
Wow. Just like the gospel said. And by 1209, he had 12 followers. Like the apostles, what did he call this first group?
He called them the Friars Minor, Fratre Minores, which means lesser brothers.
Lesser brothers, why lesser?
Our sources tell us this was deliberate. Francis really identified with the common people, the minors, this sort of second-class citizens, not the majores, the nobles and powerful. It was a statement right from the start about humility, about serving, not ruling. That was core to their identity.
So this small group, living simply, preaching poverty, they needed some kind of official, okay, right. How did they get the Pope's approval? And how did the church react to this pretty radical new group? Right, they needed legitimacy. So in 1209, Francis went to Rome and sought approval from Pope Innocent III. And amazingly, the Pope gave his oral approval for them to live as the first order of the Friars Minor.
Just like that, oral approval.
Initially, yes, and that just lit the fuse. The movement spread incredibly fast. Our sources are clear on this. Even before Francis died in 1226, his friars had scattered throughout the world.
That's astonishingly quick growth.
It really was. People were drawn to their joyfulness, which was apparently infectious, and their dedication to actually improving this world, not just sort of hoping for the next one. It was this powerful mix of radical faith and practical, joyful service that just grabbed people.
Truly remarkable. And it wasn't only men who felt this pull, was it? It seems like Francis's vision resonated much more broadly.
Oh, absolutely. His vision definitely inspired other ways of living that life, too. In 1212, there was Claire, who came from the noble Saifi family. She was so moved by Francis that she asked to join his way of life.
St. Clair.
Exactly. Francis admitted her, and she and other women who felt the same call were set up at San Damiano, the very church Francis rebuilt. They lived lives dedicated to poverty and prayer, and this became the second order, who we know today as the Poor Clares.
And then there was also something for ordinary people, lay people, who couldn't just leave everything behind.
Precisely. Around 1222, the Third Order, sometimes called tertiaries, was established. This was designed for laymen and women who were unwilling or unable to withdraw from the world. They had families, jobs, but who desired to live as closely as possible to the Franciscan ideal in their daily lives.
So, wow, in a pretty short span of time, Francis's single-minded vision blossomed into three distinct branches, all connected, each reflecting parts of his commitment. That really shows how widely appealing it was.
It really does. First, second, and third orders, all springing from that one initial spark.
It does make you think, though, doesn't it? When any movement grows that fast, those initial, really radical ideals must come under enormous pressure. This kind of explosive growth, it brings that tension we talked about. How do you keep that original vision pure when you get so big?
Yeah.
What happened as the order just kept expanding?
Yeah, it seems almost unavoidable looking back. As the order got bigger and bigger, those very ideals that defined it, especially that absolute literal poverty, became harder and harder to actually practice across the board.
How so?
Well, our sources point out that the literal interpretation of total poverty just became impracticable. Think about it. The order was expanding massively. They started getting involved in learning in universities. They needed larger buildings, cloisters in towns, which inevitably meant accumulated property.
Right, you can't run a global organization out of a mud hut.
Pretty much. Even Francis himself felt overwhelmed. He apparently said he no longer felt himself capable of directing so numerous a family. So he actually stepped down as the head, the minister general, in 1220. He wanted to focus on revising the rule, trying to adapt it. The sheer success created problems the original simple plan just hadn't foreseen.
So this wasn't just a little disagreement over details then. It sounds like a fundamental debate about what it meant to be Franciscan. What were the main sticking points?
You're right, it went deep. The absolute biggest source of conflict was about property. How strictly should the rule about owning nothing be followed? This led to really significant splits within the order. Two main groups emerged over time: the observants and the conventuals.
Observance and conventuals. Okay, what's the difference?
The observants, as the name suggests, pushed for a really strict interpretation. They believed friars should hold no property, either individually nor communally. Stick to the original primitive rule as closely as possible.
The purists.
Exactly. The conventuals, on the other hand, adopted less strict principles. They allowed for the possession of real estate and fixed revenues, essentially allowing the order, as a corporate body, to own things necessary for their work and large communities.
Pragmatists, maybe?
Yeah.
Adapting to reality?
You could see it that way. And this disagreement wasn't resolved quickly. It simmered for centuries, actually, until Pope Leo X formally separated them in 1517. They became two distinct and independent groups within the Franciscan family.
Wow, a formal split. But the story doesn't end there, does it? There was another group.
Right. Even within that stricter observant branch, some felt things still weren't strict enough, weren't close enough to Francis's original poverty and simplicity. So that led to the Capuchins emerging. They became a distinct order in 1619, really a reform movement within the observants, striving to approximate more nearly the pure ideal of Francis.
So it's like this cycle. An order born from a radical vision keeps sparking these internal movements, trying to recapture that absolute first spark. And today, these three main branches, the OFM Friars Minor, the OFM Capuchins, and the OFM Convi Conventuals, they all make up the first order, right? Each with slightly different takes on the rule. It really shows that enduring tension.
It's a fascinating case study, isn't it? How any movement, especially a successful one, has to grapple with that paradox of growth. How do you get big without losing what made you special? And, visually, Franciscans were always pretty distinct. Their habit, that robe.
Right, the brown robe.
Originally, it might have been gray or a medium brown, but yeah, now it's typically dark brown. And they wear that white cord around their waist. Since the 15th century, they often hang a special 7-decade rosary from it. It's a very recognizable look.
They even got a nickname in France because of the cord, didn't they? Cordiers.
That's right. Our sources trace that back to the Seventh Crusade. Apparently, King Louis IX saw these monks fighting really fiercely against the Saracens and asked who they were. Someone told him they were the ones de cordesiers, tied with cords, so the name stuck. It really speaks to both their look and their zeal.
Their passion, yeah.
Yeah.
Which brings us to their wider impact. Connecting this to the bigger picture, the Franciscans were real global pioneers, weren't they? Their missionary work was incredible.
Absolutely legendary. Get this. They were the first missionaries to reach the Western Hemisphere. They actually sailed with Columbus himself, who, by the way, was apparently a member of the Third Order.
No kidding. Columbus was a Franciscan tertiary.
So the sources say.
Yeah.
And a Franciscan priest celebrated the very first Mass in the New World. That's how early they were involved.
That's an amazing piece of history, and their impact on the Americas, particularly North America, is still so visible today.
Oh, completely. You can't overstate their role in, as one source puts it, spreading civilization over territory which was later to become the United States, especially in California. Think of Father Junipero Serra and the missions he founded.
San Juan Capistrano, Santa Barbara.
Exactly. So many cities grew up around those missions. The map of California reads like a litany of the saints. As someone said, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, they literally shaped the landscape. And beyond that, they were also given custody of the Christian holy sites in the Holy Land back in 1342. That's a huge responsibility they still hold today.
It's easy to just picture them as missionaries and builders, but the sources point out another side, maybe a more surprising one, given the focus on simplicity, their intellectual legacy. This order, founded on simple gospel living, produced some major thinkers.
It's one of the fascinating ironies, isn't it? Despite Francis's initial, maybe even anti-intellectual stance focused on simple preaching, not book learning, the order very quickly became a center of scholarship. Well, you have figures like Alexander of Hales, who was really important at the University of Paris, helping bring Aristotle's philosophy into Christian thought. Then there's Roger Bacon, a Franciscan friar who's often called a key father of modern empirical science, because he insisted on observation and experiments.
Roger Bacon was a Franciscan. I didn't know that.
Yep. And then there's John Duns Scotus, a hugely influential philosopher. His theological ideas, often quite subtle, had a massive impact on medieval thinking. So yes, they produced real intellectual heavyweights. Their thinking really pushed forward philosophy, theology, even science within the church and beyond.
So their impact was spiritual, social, geographical, and intellectual. Quite a legacy. But this dedication, this mission, it often came at a steep price for them, didn't it?
It certainly did. Our sources mention that they faced martyrdom in great numbers, especially when working in non-Christian lands, Asia, Africa, China, Japan, India. This continued even into the 20th century, like during the Boxer Rebellion in China.
And there's that incredibly powerful story from World War II.
Ah, yes. Father Maximilian Kolbe, an OFM conventual friar in Auschwitz. In 1941, he voluntarily laid down his life for the intended victim of a Nazi prison camp slaughter. Just stepped forward to take another man's place. It's an astonishing act of self-sacrifice.
It really shows that thread of radical service, of living out that commitment, running right through their history, even in the darkest times.
Absolutely. It embodies their core mission.
And what's the motto that still guides them today? Does it connect back to Francis?
It does, very directly. Their enduring mission still echoes Francis's own words, which effectively serve as their motto. For unto this have we been called, my brethren, even that we may heal the wounded and bind up the brokenhearted.
Heal the wounded and bind up the brokenhearted. That's powerful.
It's a clear statement of purpose that's guided them through everything, all the centuries, all the internal debates and external challenges.
What an incredible journey we've covered today, seriously.
Yeah.
From this young, wealthy guy, Francis, having this radical conversion, this singular commitment to lady poverty, all the way to a global order, grappling with huge success, internal divisions, yet still having this immense impact, that peculiar, fragrant charm of Francis, as one source beautifully put it. It really didn't die with him. It does seem to linger on among his sons to our present day.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? And it raises this bigger question, one that goes way beyond just the Franciscans. For any of us in our own lives, or maybe in organizations we're part of, how do you balance that initial, pure, maybe radical vision with just the practical realities, the complexities that always come with growth and operating in the real world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. What does it really mean to repair my house, whether that's literal or spiritual or even societal, in a way that honors that core conviction but is also, sustainable for the long haul? How do you balance individual ideals with the needs of the collective?
Absolutely. And just think about how one person's intense commitment can start something that ripples out across centuries, across continents, inspiring not just faith, but science, incredible acts of courage. It's quite something. What really stands out to you from this whole deep dive into the Franciscan story? What's the thing you'll be mulling over